Hey, my name is Aidanseesthings, and today I'm going to be doing a little recap on the EU Grid Qualifiers. I thought it'd be a good idea given we've got the grid actually starting today, the made this video, and it would be good to just look back a little bit at the qualifying brackets. So for those of you that don't really know much about the grid is sort of an alternate route into the sort of RLCS majors. So of course you've got RLCS qualifiers, then you have qualifiers for the grid, and the grid is like this tournament that goes week over week in which teams can earn points, one through winning games, and two for their placement every week in sort of this tournament. And if they get enough points, they can then play in RLCS. So it's sort of like a second route, an alternate route. However, to get into the grid is not an easy job in itself because you need to get through two stages of qualifiers. You've got the open qualifiers, which are played over 2 days, and it's an open qualifier, so anyone can join, which means there's a ton of teams. Then you have to go into the closed qualifiers. In the closed qualifiers, there's a group of teams that are already placed in there, and then only 4 teams from the open qualifiers go through to the closed qualifier. So this time around, we had 311 teams in the open qualifiers. Only 4 of those can go through. So imagine how you have to get from 311 down to 4. They've got to play a lot of games. It's a long 2 days, which the open qualifiers are played on. Those 4 teams will join the teams that have made it to the closed qualifier already, and the way that you can make it without having to go through the open is through full split grid points or full split RLCS points. Of course, of the 311 teams, there aren't a lot of teams that are expected to go very, very far, because of course anyone can join. There's a bunch of teams that obviously, we're looking out for. There's a couple of big names in there, some teams and some players, which have to still go through the open qualifiers. One, of course, is on the shirt which I'm wearing. It is Wolves Esports. So that's composed of Rix Ronde, who was previously at Libertas, so Libertas were in the grid in the full split. Then we had Oli, previously at Barrage, so you might know them as well. And then Lewis P, who previously played at Edelweiss. They come into the qualifiers as the first seed, so they are, I guess, the favourites to make it all the way through. You've then got teams like YouChoosePesk, who expect to do quite well as an underdog with Barist, Hyder and BJB, and you may know Hyder from his time with Yamor, who actually qualified for 4 regionals. Cookser is also back playing for Swag. He is joined by Flakes and Resmeister. Redemption are another shout with Mike Boy, who was also previously at Libertas. He was a teammate of Rix Ronde. Then you have Cash and Ocelon. Cash coming from Nameseekers, Ocelon coming from Fadeaway. There are some other names on that list that could provide some upsets, such as White Demons, Supermode, Anthony Modeste, New Gang, and Atlantide Wave. Now, of course, Wolves coming into this as the favourites, the number 1 seed. They actually had some worries during qualification. The team with the highest expectations then lost to New Gang in day 1 of the open qualifier, and then went on to lose their first series in day 2 to White Demons. But despite that, they actually qualified through an absolute monster lower bracket run. White Demons had a good start to day 2 after overcoming Wolves. They went on to beat YouChoosePesk, which was also a very strong team. We expected YouChoosePesk to maybe do better there, but White Demons came through there as well in a very close 3-2 series. But they got knocked down to the lower bracket by Supermode, and then knocked out by Source Squad in the lower bracket. Source Squad, of course, is Rise, Mellow Shishu, and Ukis. So there's some names there that you might recognize. Swag and Redemption both qualified through the winners bracket in somewhat expected fashion. And joining Wolves qualifying through the lower bracket would be Wu, so that's Parker, Kisai, and Faris. They lost in the second round of the winners bracket against Game Up, but then went on to have an impressive displays against both Arcane and Supermode. Now, there's a few teams in there that probably didn't get as far as they would have liked, and that includes Stealth 7, MCon Rotterdam Black, Dead Rabbits. All a lot of potential in those teams, but they couldn't quite make it through the open qualifiers. So 4 teams going through to the closed qualifiers. Just to recap, that's Woo, Redemption, Swag, and Wolves Esports. Now, it's in the closed qualifiers where things really start to heat up. There's 16 teams in there, and only 4 will be playing in the grid in the winter split. So the 16 teams, we've of course got Wolves, Woo, Swag, Redemption all coming through the open qualifier, but then coming into the closed qualifier through their 4-point rankings were Team Kezo. You'll probably recognize them as Magnifico, because that's what they were previously known as. We then got Train Hard Esports. They were previously known as Vent Gaming. We then got Rix GG, S2V, The Last Resort, FC Barcelona, Minx, and Denied. FC Barcelona being maybe one of the biggest names in that group of teams, and but of course with a completely different roster. But to add on to those teams, we then also had Singularity, so also a huge name in Rocket League. They've also picked up Scrub Killer. You then got Dignitas, Solary, Fadeaway through the full grid split. Now, it's interesting to note that of some of these teams that were automatically seeded into the closed qualifier, they've had quite some roster changes. So, of course, the org has been placed in the closed qualifier, but some of the players are completely different. And in the case of FC Barcelona, which is one of the main ones to note here, is their roster is completely different, as their team essentially disbanded after the full split. And that saw Devo move to Guild Esports in place of Scrub Killer. Then saw Itachi go to Giants to replace Tox. And, of course, Ronicky making his move to Team Liquid in place of Cooksit. Now, their new roster is made up of Taz and Blurry from Nameseekers. So, two very good players. Did quite well with Nameseekers. And then it's completed by Rizex from Libertas. So, of course, now we've got my boy Rizex and Rix Ronde in this closed qualifier. Yeah, so it's some big moves for these players going to FC Barcelona. There's a lot of expectation on them, but they haven't been getting the best results leading up to these closed qualifiers. And with those expectations to live up to, it could be a lot of pressure during this day of qualification. Now, Singularity, of course, well, they picked up Scrub Killer from Guild, and that makes them Scrub's 5th team of the year. This, of course, is a whole other topic why Scrub Killer's moving around so much, but I won't get into that too much now. Solary dropped Yukis, who then went to Source Squad, who we mentioned earlier. They didn't make it out of the open qualifiers, but they replaced Yukis with Tox. Dignitas, also kind of a shadow of their former selves, with the only Violent Panda being the player remaining from their sort of golden era. Jory is, of course, being picked up in the full split, but he's yet to really settle in at Dignitas, and we haven't really seen him in form yet. We know he's a talented player, but just hasn't got there yet. And then, of course, they've got apparently Jack, who joined on November 1st, in place of Yukio, as he moved to Fadeaway to take the place of Ocelon on their roster. And of course, lastly, Rixaji notably picked up Magnus, who has a ton of experience in the Rocket League scene, very well-known player, and they'll be probably quite happy to have him on the roster. Now, moving on, of course, the first round of the closed qualifier had some big upsets already. Of course, Solary last split a top 10 team. They got swept aside by Wolves, losing 2-0, 3-0, and 6-1 respectively. So Wolves Esports only just narrowly missing on that perfect sweep, only conceding 1 goal and scoring 11 goals in the process. Scrubs Killer's start to Singularity was not looking too great, as they got sent to the lower bracket by Woo. FC Barcelona also getting sent down to the lower bracket by S2V, which, given their new roster, isn't a massive upset, but it's not looking good for the org. Round 2 of the upper bracket saw Rix GG qualify by beating Woo 4-2. Fadeaway versus Team Keso was an absolute banger, probably the best series of the day, as Fadeaway came back from being down 3-1 in the series in the best of 7 to then win 4-3, and therefore qualified in that game. Wolves qualified by winning in a really intense series with S2V, which went 4-2, the winning goal coming in overtime of Game 6. Dignitas was the last team to qualify through the upper bracket. They beat Redemption in round 1 and Train Hard in round 2. In the lower bracket, Team Singularity, after losing that upper bracket first game, they went on a clean run at the cost of course, Last Resort, Train Hard, and Swag. So really sad to see Swag go out. Really sad day for them. They scrapped their way through the third round, beating Denied 3-2, S2V 4-3, and eventually then losing to Singularity 4-3. So all close games. I would say that on another day, maybe Swag would have a bit more luck or be able to push through. But they could at least provide a lot of entertainment from start to finish during this closed qualifier. FC Barcelona crashed out of the tournament as we saw Solary bounce back after their loss against Wolves, who would then lose their next series to Team Kezo. Redemption had a relatively smooth run in the lower bracket with a 3-1 win over Minx, a 4-1 win over Woo, and then qualify with a 4-1 win over Team Kezo. Definitely one of the bigger surprises of the closed qualifiers. Definitely one of the bigger surprises of the closed qualifiers. Of course, Redemption, we know that they are a strong roster, great team. But of course, Team Kezo's out, Magnifico, if it's easier to process in your head. They lost so narrowly against Fadeaway, and they were looking good. They're a strong team. So going then down into that lower bracket, coming up against Redemption, losing 4-1. Maybe they've got a little bit rattled after, throwing the game to Fadeaway. So to recap, this is RixGG, Fadeaway, Wolves Esports, Dignitas, Singularity, and Redemption qualify for the Grid EU Winter Split, which will start on the 26th of November, which is today. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want to find more Rocket League news, I have a whole bunch of other types of videos as well. But if you enjoy this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. You know, drop a like, drop a comment. Love to see you guys get in the discussion. See what you think about the games. You know, maybe you watch some. Would love to hear your thoughts. But for now, peace.